Silvia Federici is a teacher and a scholar and an activist who now lives and works in the US, and she is from the tradition of autonomous Marxist feminist scholarship, and she has agreed to do an interview with us here today. So thank you very much for doing this interview with GenderLink, Silvia, and it's lovely to have you.
Thanks to you for inviting me.
So you have been in South Africa to launch your book Revolution at Point Zero, and if you could just tell us maybe some of the main ideas that are in that book and how that has been received in South Africa so far.
Thank you. The book has been received very well. I'm very happy to see that people have been very engaged in the discussion, workshops that we had with the main themes of the book. The book has a collection of essays that covers a period of almost 30-40 years. You know, from early essays I wrote in the context of the feminist movements in the United States to essays that I wrote in recent years about the destruction of the global economy, and in particular the question of reproduction, how social reproduction has been affected by the processes of globalization. And in fact, social reproduction is really the main theme of the book in all its different connotations. I centered on this question in my political work as well as in my writing, because there's a very profound connection between the situation of women across the world and their social position, and the fact that in our society, in every country, social reproduction, and particularly those aspects of social reproduction that are connected with what traditionally has been called women's labor, domestic work, housework, you know, have been generally devalued. So I've been very interested, together with other women, understanding the roots of this devaluation. Why in this society the work, the activities that are most important for the reproduction of life, and are also most important for the reproduction of the workforce, are in fact very often not seen as work. They are not remunerated, and in fact if a woman is engaged in this activity in a full-time way, you know, she ends up being dependent on the man, and she often ends up being seen as someone who is not working. So many of the articles in the book are very much concerned with understanding, you know, how social reproduction has been constructed, particularly in capitalist society, how its devaluation has affected women's life and women's work, and what kind of struggles we must engage in to change that, because it is unacceptable that, again, you know, the work and activity that sustain life and in fact produces the workforce, makes it possible for other people to work, continues to be devalued.
Well, one of those struggles and those movements was wages for housework, and you were a key figure in starting that movement. How did that come about, and what were you guys saying?
Yes, I was one of the key figures. Not one. Yeah, the Wages for Housework campaign, it was an international campaign that began in the early 70s, launched by a number of women coming from different countries. At the beginning it was Italy, England, the United States, and later it expanded to Germany, Switzerland, France. In different countries we had groups. Also there were different branches of Wages for Housework in the United States. And it originated precisely from the analysis that I was beginning to sketch out, an analysis that basically connected the devaluation of women's position in society with the devaluation of social reproduction. And in a sense, saw the campaign as a way, a vehicle, both to revalorize housework, both to gain some remuneration for this work and counter the whole trend which has been to make it invisible as work. And at the same time also, to basically challenge a whole capitalist organization of work, a whole division of labor that has really concentrated on wage work, production for the market as the only type of work and activity that produces social wealth. And so for us, the campaign had both an economic dimension to give people who are involved in this work, not just women. In fact, the struggle was wages for housework, not wages for women, not wages for housewives. In fact, we thought that the fact that this work was not remunerated was very much responsible for naturalizing it, for making it appear as something that pertained to women's psychology, femininity, that the moment in which this work would be waged, it would be desexualized. You'll begin to see for what it is, which is a social activity, and not something pertaining to women's body or women's mind, assuming there is such a thing. So for us, again, it had both an economic dimension in terms of being able to attach some remuneration for people who perform this work and not condemn them to dependence. And also we saw it as a vehicle to change power relation between women and men, and to basically challenge the structure of society that does not recognize the value of a work that is incredibly important. And this, I think, I want to underline this point. We saw it also as a first step in transforming the work itself. In fact, or reorganizing this work in a very different way that is less isolating for those who perform it. And it's that it could open it up to new forms of cooperation in the performance of this work.
Okay, I think that's really interesting. I think in South Africa there are so many spaces in which that cooperation is already happening, and that there is collective work being done, but it still remains women's work in many ways. And one of the things that is often said in South African society is that, it's about culture, and that culture is often used as a disciplining tool and a disciplining mechanism to keep women in that space. Yes. And so, I just wanted to know what you think about that, because there's already these collective forms of work happening. Yes. But it seems as if the valorization is not there, or the justification is through culture. And so how would we move past that specific?
Well, like concept like culture and tradition are very treacherous, and we have to be very, very careful, because first of all, culture is no justification for anything, for any form of social behavior. The question is always whether culture is based on justice or it is based on prejudice. And, we need to change culture. And moreover, many times what is referred to as culture is something non-existent. It's a construction. It's something that is very constructed. For example, when people speak of African culture, it's a fiction. If you look actually at the continent as a whole, from Egypt, to South Africa, you will see there is a great variety of cultures. And there are very different cultures also within each country, depending on the class to which people belong, right? So I think that argument has to be put to rest. And we have to move away from this notion of culture and tradition. We have to ask, whether behavior and values correspond to criteria and contribute, you know, to the promotion of social justice or not. This should be the fundamental you know, measure to decide if any particular form of behavior should be dismissed or should be continued.
One of the things you speak about specifically is this idea of solidarity, and I just wanted to ask what do those you know, issues like rape or the subjugation of women, or even the exploitation of women in the home in that way, or using culture as a disciplining tool, what does it take away from the idea of a human solidarity against capitalist domination and exploitation?
Yeah, that's a very important question, because I think that many men feel threatened, you know, when women are fighting, as they have been, to have more economic independence, to have a life that is more autonomous, and you know, to be treated on a basis of equal standing, as in front of the law, in front of the political world, and economically. Then men, of course, are threatened, and of course they use concepts such as culture, and in many ways we have also seen a surge of violence against women. And I think it is very important to see that this violence, it's a violence, of course, that is unacceptable. Any form of violence against the human beings and abuse is unacceptable, but it's also something that breaks down the solidarity between women and men, and weakens, you know, the kind of struggle that people need to make today in order to transform society, in order to create a society that is more just. You know, you cannot have a struggle that is successful when you have many of its members, many of the people are participating in, turn against the other and brutalize them. You know, that's a divisive type of behavior. It's really, it sabotages the struggle itself. It's so important to make men understand that in abusing women, in oppressing them, in seeing them as sexual object and attacking them as sexual object, they are actually, you know, hurting themselves. They are actually turning against themselves. That in further devaluing the people who have reproduced their life and reproducing their life, they devalue their own lives. And I think that is important, that women of the younger generation really make that connection very strongly.
Thank you very, very much for talking to us and for being here. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
I would like to add that this has been a very, very educational journey for me to come here, and I'm very, very grateful to the people who have brought me here, because it's been a fantastic experience.